Okay, so this is the Leeds Hospitals Charity seminar, just to celebrate all the fantastic support we've received from our supporters, and just to talk about the huge difference that they make. And I'd like to start off by introducing Esther, who's the Chief Exec, who will be talking a little bit more about how your support really does make a difference.
Thanks. Thank you, Mel. So hello, my name's Esther Wakeman. I'm the Chief Executive of Leeds Hospitals Charity. Want to say a massive thank you for the support that you've been giving to the charity, especially during difficult times of COVID and everything else that's been happening. It really does mean a lot. And hopefully you're going to hear a bit more today about why your support matters so much. If we go to the next slide. So this is a lovely photo of Matilda, who's she's 9 years old. She was born with spina bifida, and she was so grateful for the care that she had in the Children's Hospital, that she did some fundraising for us, and you know, it's just lovely, some of the stories that we get to hear and people we get to talk to, and the difference that the staff in the hospital make to people's experience, but then how they're able to work with us as the charity to say, well, what else can we do that's over and above what the NHS pays for to really make a difference. So I really want to say a massive thank you, because it's only thanks to our supporters that we can do any of this. And you're going to be hearing today from two very special guests. Dr Liz and Kerry are going to be talking about how the support that you've given have enabled us to provide additional things for the Leeds Centre for Newborn babies, which is always lovely to see, you know, the difference that we can make there. We've had 15 applications from that unit, and given a total of over £100,000. So it is really making a huge difference to the team. We'll go to the next slide, please. So as the charity for Leeds Teaching Hospitals Trust, we do support all of the hospitals in Leeds. It's another photo here of Matilda again, and she was taking part, I think, in an arts and crafts session there. But in total, last year we were able to support 365 applications to the tune of almost 5 million. 1.5 of that was specifically for research, and we also, for the first time, did a call for papers, a call for applications specifically for things that were innovative, which is part of the funding that we provide for research and innovation. And this was made possible because we were very grateful to receive a generous donation that somebody left in a gift in their will for £100,000, slightly more than that, to be used for whatever was the priority for the charity at the time. So we were able to get these wonderful applications in. If we go to the next slide, and tell you a little bit more about these. So people could apply for up to £10,000 for funding to do something innovative, and these are 3 examples of things that we funded. We actually managed to fund 11 applications in total, which is great. I mean, I'll let you read what it says on the screen about these particular projects, but often we're asked to fund projects in their infancy, and then it allows that person to go on and apply for a much bigger pot of funding to support their research going forward. And sometimes it's about funding innovations that can then make really big difference, but it's just having that initial pot of money to be able to try something new, and we'll continue to feed back on how that money is really making a difference. If we go to the next slide, it was really hard actually watching the video that we did with Jack. So Jack is just 10 years old, and he's got Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and we spoke to his mum because, again, thanks to a legacy we received, we were able to give £1 million to fund a clinical research facility in the Children's Hospital. And for Jack, his life expectancy is, you know, potentially a lot lower because of his illness. And, you know, his mum said that above everything, he wanted to take part in as many clinical trials as possible to help other little boys like him, because even if we can't find a cure in time to save his life and, you know, improve his quality of life, then he wants to know that he's doing everything he can to help others, which, I mean, it really got me to think that somebody would be so selfless as to want to do everything they can, and so young as well. So being able to support things like this really do make a difference, not just now, but also into the future, and many years to come. We go to the next slide. So just to give you a flavour of some of the ways that donations have made a difference across the hospitals, we've been able to provide funding for everything from the Employee Support Fund, comfort care packs. Now, these are really well received. So when a relative is in hospital, it might be that their loved one is dying and they want to be by their bedside, just having some toiletries so they can go and brush their teeth, and just basic things really make all the difference. We also fund a bereavement nurse, a staff chaplain, clinical research trials, electric wheelchairs for the stroke unit, which is what I believe the picture here is for. We were able to fund two wheelchairs actually, and then vital projects at the Leeds Centre for Newborn Care, which is what you're going to hear more about now. So I'm very happy to pass you over to Liz, who will be able to tell you a lot more about that service. Thank you, Liz.
Hi, thanks, Esther. I'm really glad to be here today because we have benefited such a huge amount from the generosity of the charity, and that only comes from the people that have donated to it, and the impact of the benefits that we've had has been huge. So I'd really like to take an opportunity just to tell you a little bit about our neonatal unit and just demonstrate a few of the things that the charity has helped to pay for over the years, but particularly over the last couple of years. So if I could have the next slide, please. So our neonatal unit is one of the biggest in the country. We across two sites at Clarendon Wing at the LGI and Gledhow Wing at St James's. And we have our intensive care unit and our high dependency care over at the LGI. And then Jimmy's is our sort of getting ready for home unit, our special care baby unit. And both of them are big and busy. And to the extent that we have about 1,600 or 1,700 admissions of babies every year, about 10% of newborn babies actually end up needing neonatal care. And yet when we have admissions, a lot of the parents that come to the unit with their newborn babies actually have never really heard of a neonatal unit before, and yet they spend the first days or often weeks of their parenting life, their newborn baby's life, in hospital on our neonatal unit. Our unit is one of a few across the country that look after not only very premature babies, so we will look after babies as tiny as 22 weeks gestation, 18 weeks early, which is tiny. And I think the smallest baby that we've ever looked after was about 360 grams when she was born. And she is a thriving little baby girl. Well, she's quite a big girl now, but she's fab. But we don't only look after the preterm babies, we also look after babies that have been diagnosed antenatally or found postnatally to have problems either with their heart or surgical problems. And we care for them from their mothers during their pregnancy. They're delivered here, they have their care here, and eventually go home. And that includes babies not only from Leeds, but from across Yorkshire. And so it's a massive kind of geographical area that we look after. And in fact, we have, I don't know if you know, but within Leeds, we have a lot of specialist services. We have cardiology, we have liver disease as a specialty and kidney disease. And certainly for babies with liver problems, those babies might come from as far away as Scotland or Ireland. So we have a really massive area that we cover, and families being a long way from home, often for a very, very long time. So it's really important that the facility that we provide for them can allow them to try to be as comfortable as possible, and also that we allow them to learn to be parents in such a strange environment. And traditionally, neonatal care has been very much that, you know, the baby's born and we take the baby and it sits in a little incubator for a few weeks. And parents have often reported that they feel very removed from the baby. They feel like they're in the way, that they're voyeurs on the baby's care, and they never really get to feel like a mummy or a daddy until they get home. And obviously there's a huge amount of bonding that they've missed out on. So it's a really, really tough time. And the incidence of mental health issues when you've had a baby in a neonatal unit is really high. It's said that the incidence of post-traumatic stress disorder after a neonatal journey is higher than Iraq war veterans, and that's really scary. So we need to do what we can to make parents comfortable and allow them to look after their babies as much as they can. And that's where a huge amount of your donations have gone towards in the last few years. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So from an equipment point of view, there's a very big national charity called Bliss, and they did a study a few years ago now that showed that over 80% of equipment in neonatal units was funded by charities. And I think probably Esther and Leeds Hospitals Charity would probably agree that that's probably the case in our neonatal unit. Over the last few years, we've had funding to provide state-of-the-art incubators for babies. So when babies are born early, they clearly, every part of them is delicate and immature, and they need to be kept in the optimum environment for them to thrive. And the latest incubators now are quite amazing, and they will control the humidity around the baby so that the baby's skin and fluid balance is good. It keeps the light and the noise down for babies, because really to get the best outcome for our babies, we have to have an environment that replicates the womb as much as possible, which sounds a bit crazy, but we need the room to be dark, to be quiet, and these incubators really help with that. The other thing about the incubators, which is really cool as well, is that of course these days you can't get anywhere without having your phone, and some of the incubators have USB ports, so that if a parent can't be present, they can record stories on their phone or just record their voice on their phone and play it to their baby when they're not there. And that gives those babies the kind of sense of safety and security, which really helps them sort of relax and allow themselves to recover rather than be stressed out by the fact that they're in a very alien environment. One of the best ways of our babies relaxing is by being skin to skin with their mum or their dad. And that can be, that's kind of the best way for them to actually stabilize a lot of their physiology. And so we try and encourage parents to do that. And tiny little babies, you know, these 23, 24-week babies, if they're stable enough, can come out for skin to skin in the first few days. And we try and encourage that to happen as much as possible. But of course, if you're going to do that, you have to be prepared to sit there for quite a long time, cuddling your baby, and you have to be comfortable. So we've got lots of very lovely reclining chairs that enable parents to spend prolonged periods holding their baby and allowing their baby to feel safe, secure, and recover. And likewise, transport incubators, when we're having to take these little souls to theatre or moving them across city, it's really important that they're moved safely. And we have 3 transport incubators in the service, which allows us to do that with full monitoring and full sort of life support systems to enable that to happen. I think the part of neonatal care that I am most passionate about is how we care for families and give parents the opportunity to become parents even whilst they're in the neonatal unit. And of course, the last couple of years has been really challenging for that, because at the start of COVID, the NHS stopped all visiting. Now, we don't see our parents as visitors. Parents are parents and they have to be with their children. But despite that, we stopped partners coming. And so for the first few weeks of the pandemic, we only had mothers. And of course, that was really difficult, that not only had they just got over a traumatic birth, but they were then kind of had the sole responsibility for their child and relaying messages back to their partner. So Be Create gave us an opportunity to share photos and videos of their babies in a very secure platform, and that they could access those from home and share them with family if they wanted to. And that has been a real lifesaver, and parents have been so positive about that, which has been fantastic, to be able to wake up in the middle of the night worrying about your baby and click on Be Create and there's a photograph or a little video of your baby in the hospital. Parents aren't the only ones that suffered. Obviously, siblings, which we have always welcomed onto the unit, have been unable to visit. And that's really difficult, because you don't understand why your parent is suddenly not as available to you as they used to be. And parents find it really difficult to explain it all to siblings and to their other children. And so one of our junior doctors came up with this idea of sibling packs, which is age specific, and it's been put together by kind of an education team and play therapists. And it's a little bag of arts and crafts and various bits of information that parents can take home for their kids. And it just really helps children feel part of their baby's care, and helps parents explain to their other children, exactly what's happening with their new baby. And that, again, has been really well received by families, and has been actually internationally really well received as well. So that's making a difference all over the place now, which is brilliant. Family integrated care is the sort of the model of care that we use in Leeds, and that's we're one of the, well, we were the first unit in the UK to follow that model of care, which means that we get parents as primary carers for their babies whilst they're in hospital. And so as kind of the trailblazer in the country, we hosted the International FICare Conference back in the olden days when you could all be together in one room. And that again was really successful, being able to showcase all the work that we've done. And that again was funded very generously by the hospital charity. And we had people from all over the world, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, North America. It was really exciting. It was great fun. And then most latterly, the thing that I think well, I don't know, they've all made a big difference, but the most current one is a podcast that I've been lucky enough to be part of with two of our veteran parents, so mums that have had babies on the neonatal unit. And the podcast was the brainchild of Kerry, who you're about to hear from, and made possible by a friend and ex-mum as well, current mum, but ex-neonatal unit parent, who is a broadcaster and podcast director. And I know that Kerry's going to tell you a little bit more about that. So I hope that that's given you a flavour of the sort of things that your incredibly generous donations have done for us. We're very grateful, and more importantly, I think the babies and families of Leeds are even more grateful, because it's made what's the hardest time of their lives a little more bearable. Thank you, and I'll hand you over to Kerry.
Thank you. I just want to start by telling you a little bit about my own personal story, and then I will go on and tell you a bit more about the wonderful things we've been able to do with the funding. So I'm really glad to be here today to be able to share both sides of the story, because usually whenever I do a talk, it's either my story or the things that I'm doing as a volunteer on the unit. So my link with neonatal started in 2016. I was pregnant with my son, and during the end of my pregnancy had a few complications, which I was told was just symptoms of my own anxiety. Anxiety is something that I'd suffered with for a lot of years, but I knew deep down that it wasn't my anxiety. So fast forward to 35 weeks pregnant, I ended up in hospital where I had a swab, which was a test for preterm labour over the next 2 weeks, and that test came back negative, that there was no sign of labour. So I was sent home and once again told it was just my anxieties. So they sent me home with some painkillers and told me to have a bath. At that point, we lived about 15 minutes away from the hospital. So I got home, maybe 15 minutes later, got in the bath straight away, and the bath started to fill up with blood. So I started to panic, real panic. And then we were rushed back to the hospital to be told I was actually 5 centimetres dilated. And I think that was a bit of a shock because I'd not been listened to. And then all of a sudden, it wasn't my anxiety, it was actually happening. But then suddenly the labour room started to fill up with staff. My heart rate was dangerously high, and in came the neonatal staff. And this was the first time that we'd even heard about neonatal, considered neonatal, and we didn't even know where it was in conjunction to where I was. So once Charlie was born, he was put on my chest, and he started making just like a grunting noise. So he was taken to neonates, but I just did not know where that unit was or where my baby had gone. But then I also then delivered a green placenta, which was quite large, and that was the reason why I'd been quite unwell, and that was the reason that Charlie was then born a little bit early and taken to the unit. But going back to my anxiety, at that point in my life, I was really anxious about being locked in places, and I would only visit buildings that had easy access to get in and out, and I could see where the windows were. So then I had to get my head around realizing that we was going to stay in hospital for a little bit longer than I wanted to. But it was about 3 hours later that I actually got to see Charlie properly, and we headed to the neonatal unit, where we had to ring a bell and wait to be let in before we walked down a long corridor. And I could feel my heart racing, knowing that I was essentially locked in. But the thought of turning the corridor and seeing my baby, naively, I thought that all my worries would go away. But seeing my baby filled with wires and feeling sheer panic of being locked in and getting that instant fight or flight response. Seeing him covered in wires and machines and thinking, how am I going to hold my baby when all I wanted to do was run? How could I put him down safely when I just wanted to escape? And I instantly felt the bond between me and Charlie fade away. Thankfully, Charlie progressed really well, but with his progression came my stronger anxiety. When we was finally discharged, I became really unwell and I was unable to leave my house. I have no idea why, but I think it's because I was eaten up inside with guilt by avoiding my baby in those new days because of the fear of being locked in. Once I started to feel a little bit better within myself, I realised how amazing the unit was and how all those staff cared for my baby when I couldn't, and how they made him better and able to send him home. And at that point, I felt like I needed to give something back. So I inquired about doing some fundraising. I was then told of a voluntary position which was coming available on the unit, and this was parent support, to be able to support other parents that were going through the same journey as me. I said yes, but I wasn't sure how I was actually going to get back on the unit at this point. I remember the first day I went back on to volunteer, and I met one of the other volunteers, a lady called Vicky, and I met her for a coffee before we went up. And just talking to her beforehand, I felt an instant bond with her, and I felt an instant relief of all the guilt that I'd been holding inside. And I knew at that point that giving parent support on the unit was such an essential part of treatment for parents going through this journey, because just having someone to talk to and someone that's walked that unique path just makes things feel a little bit easier. So once we got into the volunteering, with the help of the funding from Leeds Hospitals Charity, we was able to offer sessions of Beads of Courage, which there's a picture on the next slide. So Beads of Courage is essentially a visual keepsake of everything that your baby's been through. Could be blood transfusions, even the littlest things like if they've had a feed that day or if they've not had a good day. So it's a really good journey. But also within those sessions pre-COVID, we did it as a group, and we got each parents to talk to each other. And after a few sessions, we noticed the bond between those parents grow, and we noticed how if one parent couldn't be there because they had another child to take to school, the other parent would essentially keep an eye on their baby. And it was just so nice to see how close parents became at the worst time of their lives, really. And we also did arts and crafts sessions and coffee and cake sessions, where essentially dads would get the arts and craft equipment out and cover everything in glitter. and just shine with different parents and probably people that they'd never speak to before. And also one of the lovely things that funding enables in the hospital is other keepsake memories, handprints, footprints of babies. I had the pleasure of working with a parent whose baby was palliative care, and we made a memory book, but it wasn't just a memory book about the baby, it was a memory book about her, because I realised it was important for her to be her and not just be thrown into all the stresses that a journey of neonatal can bring. And that particular parent, I think from what she said, she ended up coming out of her shell and became a better person around the unit, because I understood how hard it is to speak to staff or just to be on that unit. Sometimes it's overwhelming, so to feel like yourself again for 5 minutes is really important. And then COVID hit, and I was really touched by the thought of parents being alone, and the thought of some parents saying bye to their baby, going to theatre alone, or the worries that dads would feel helpless or other parents would feel helpless, and that all that support had been taken away. And I just felt that it needed to be in the unit. Some kind of parent support, peer support just needed to be in the unit. And I'd started listening to podcasts myself during the lockdown, and I thought, why not create a podcast? So I was told by some of the staff to apply for funding, which is something I'd never thought about. So I put an application form in myself, applied for funding with the help of Liz and some of the other members, and thankfully it got accepted, and we was able to make a series which covers everything from pregnancy and finding out that you might have complications, all the way to going home, and everything in between, bereavement. We got to speak to health professionals, we spoke to a variety of different families, and we wasn't sure how it was going to be received, but we've had such amazing feedback. And I think one of the things that I'm really proud of is it is now used for staff training, so staff have a better idea of how things are from a parent perspective, and that just wouldn't have been possible without the funding. So thank you. And there's a little clip of the podcast which we'll play for you.
This is Unexpected Beginnings, the Neonatal Unit.
I burst into tears. He looked like a little skinned rabbit.
We changed to formula, but at the time I was like so heartbroken and I felt like I'd failed.
Why did my body do this? Why did it let them out so early?
I completely just broke down. I couldn't stop crying.
This tiny little hand just shot up and grabbed my finger.
I'm a mum now. Like, wow.
This podcast looks at the highs and the lows of life on the neonatal unit. Recorded in conjunction with Leeds Children's Hospital and funded by Leeds Hospitals Charity, this podcast is hosted by me, Caroline Verdon.
And me, Kerry Bickerdike. We have both had babies on the neonatal unit, and we both understand how hard it can be.
Our hope is that by sharing our stories and those of other parents, this podcast will be able to hold your hand at whatever point you are in the journey. Unexpected Beginnings, the Neonatal Unit, launches on Wednesday the 17th of November at 8 a.m.
Thank you.
Mel, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I just want to say thank you so much to Liz and Kerry for coming along and sharing your stories and telling us a lot more about how the support has helped. It's really great. I know I've appreciated hearing just about the wide range from small things to huge things that make a big difference. And Kerry, just to hear about your experiences firsthand and how you've benefited from it, and also just how you've taken your experience to help other parents with the podcast as well, is fantastic. So thank you for that. And Esther, thank you for giving an overview of the fantastic stuff that we do as a charity. So I hope that's just given you a little bit of an idea of how your support helps. I don't know if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask the panel. No. If not, I will just end it just saying again, thank you to Kerry, Liz and Esther for taking the time this afternoon and just sharing some stories and information about how the support helps. It's really great just to see the benefit of the donations that people make and the difference it makes to people's lives. So thank you.
Thank you.